Okay, so now that the meeting has been has started recording, let's talk more about vocabulary. Actually, vocabulary is the fundamental area in your overall communication skill, okay? Because it affects your listening. Of course, when you listen to the audio files and you do not understand, comprehend on the questions or the details that are being dictated or read in the audio, you will not identify what the correct answer is. If you have confusion with vocabulary and lexical resource, definitely it will lead to a lot of lapses when it comes to your answers, okay? Same goes with reading. How can you easily, although we have techniques on how to depict a certain difficult word in the passage, but then gusto natin may baon tayo, right? Like when you're going on a war, definitely you need to bring weapon. Here in the IELTS subtest, your weapon, the most fundamental weapon that you need is you should be equipped with a rich vocabulary and lexical resource, right? Ito yung magiging weapon mo. Because it affects all the 4 subtests, listening, reading. But it is highly important in your speaking subtest because in the speaking subtest, it assesses how spontaneous you can be as a speaker. It assesses the various use of words that you will be using to describe things, to answer abstract questions and complex questions, okay? And of course, in the writing subtest, the number 1 rule in the writing subtest is avoid repetition, okay? Because if you keep repeating the same words, it only goes to show that you are not competent enough on your vocabulary and lexicon resource. And that's a big percentage of the grading criteria. It's 25% of the grading criteria. That's why if you have grammatical inconsistencies and mistakes, definitely it will not do you good on your writing subtest. Especially on the writing subtest, you leave a 250 and 150 word evidence of how you could execute a good writing, okay? So that's why vocabulary is very important. Are you academic students or GT students? Academic. So what band score do you need? 7. A 7, okay. And Ronel, GT. Band score that you need is a 6. And Nicole, what band score do you need? 6 or 7? They didn't require any. But I think if you're going to Australia, you need a 6. Okay? So then, a lot of people are actually, a lot of test takers have a hard time on the writing subtest. Okay? So if you don't get the technique right, and if you don't enrich your vocabulary, you will not secure the band score that you need on your writing subtest. Because even very intelligent test takers fail to create a good output for the writing subtest. I personally just got a 7 on my writing subtest. So ako na, hindi na what's that. I don't want to put it in a way na medyo mayabang pakinggan. Pero I'm already a coach, but I just got a 7 on my writing subtest because that's how strict they are, right? So in Australia, if you're going to apply for a job, especially a bachelor's degree, it requires a bachelor's degree, you should not get any score lower than 7. Okay? So kung gusto ko maging teacher, professor sa Australia, I need to secure not lower than 7. Ganun sila kahigpit. So, it goes to show that writing is really a difficult task. That's why you need to make sure that you're equipped with rich vocabulary or the effective vocabulary words instead of the common or the basic ones that we are used to. Because definitely you will be using these words when you are describing illustrations, statistical data, right? So definitely you need an academic level of vocabulary. So don't worry for the GT students if you feel like this part of the discussion will not be so beneficial for you because it will be used on your writing task too. Okay? So this is yung first half ng ating discussion is going to focus more on the academic module. Okay? Because it's for task 1. Kasi sa mga GT students, good news, your task 1 is letter writing. Okay? So, gagawa kayo ng sulat. It has nothing to do with any statistical data. All you have to do is familiarize yourself with the different types of letters that might come out in the writing task 1. But don't worry because Sir Kevin will schedule just one lecture specifically for GT students. Naka-attend na kayo ng writing task 1 lecture ni Sir Kevin? Task 1, hindi pa. Aha, okay. So, probably hindi pa niya napaplot. But soon, he is going to talk or have a lecture with you guys, okay? So, nothing to worry though, because GT letter writing is the easiest task in the writing test. Okay. First, let's talk about writing the introduction. Okay, when you're writing your introduction, it's going to put you in a very bad spot if you just copy what's written in the task description. As you know, your task description is AKA the instruction. Okay, so it's written on the upper part of the test column, and it usually starts with wait. Hang on. Okay, it usually starts with a sentence. You are recommended to spend 20 minutes in this area on task 1. This is for academic students, okay? And then on task 2, there is also the beginning of your task description said that you are recommended to spend 40 minutes in this area. That's why we are advising you to finish your task 2 first before you go on to task 1. Because task 2 is requiring you to write 250 words. So it's very important for you to complete the number of the words required in the task description and or exceed. But you can't, pag mas mababa pa sa 250 words, definitely it will result to a very bad score. Okay? So on writing task 1, the last part of the task description says that you are to write 150 words at least. Okay? So sa task 2, 250 words. Sa task 1, 150 words. Okay? That's why we are recommending you to prioritize task 2. Finish it first before you move on to task 1 is because mas malaki yung number of words na kailangan doon. So if you complete that, there's a high chance for you to pass your writing subtest. Kasi 250 words compared to 150, there's a 100 word difference. right? So when you're writing your introduction, do not copy what's written in the task description. There is a possibility that you make use of some of the words in your task description, but try your best to paraphrase it. Okay? When you're paraphrasing, it simply means that you are rewriting, reconstructing the task description into your own words. Okay? Because if you just copy it, it simply means that you are not competent enough with your vocabulary and lexical resource. That's why we're advising you not to copy. Okay? So these are the common words that you could use in your introduction, because for the academic students, writing task 1 will be diagrams, graphs, illustrations, maps, flowcharts, process, chart lines, line bar graph, pie graph, tables. Okay? These are the most common things that will come out on writing task 1. So you need to be familiar with these words. Data, figure, number, amount, quantity, percentage, proportion, ratio, and rate. Because you will be describing and you will be interpreting statistical data. Okay? So you need these numerical expressions so that you can sound more precise in your writing task 1. But of course, the reason why we will be discussing this in more detail, because there are some words that you really can't use them when you're describing maps. Okay? Magkaiba yung mga words na gagamitin natin when we're encountering maps and when we're encountering graphs. Kasi in maps, we talk about directions and places, okay? But when it comes to graphs, we're talking about trends. May increase ba or decrease, okay? All right, let's start off with the word number. So this is the most common word that you could use on writing task 1, the word number. But always remember that you should use the phrase, the number of. So it should precede with the determiner the and followed by the preposition of, the number of. Okay? Because it is grammatically and you will commit a vocabulary error and a grammar error if you just use the word number. Okay? So it should be used in a phrase. And it should be followed by a plural noun. Okay? Usually, countable noun. Okay, let's refresh your memory when it comes to countable and uncountable noun. Medyo nakalimutan ko lang si ma'am, nung grade school pa yan, or nung high school pa yan, okay? So, simply when we say countable nouns, it pertains to nouns that you can count with your hands, all right? So, uncountable nouns are nouns that have a measurement, okay? For example, sugar, flour, coffee, milk. You need measurements in order to get the exact number or amount, okay? But when it comes to countable nouns, these are like apples, oranges, chairs, anything that you can count instantly, okay? Baka may magsabi, pwede naman talagang i-count ang granules ng coffee or something like that. But ideally, you can't do that in one sitting, right? So that's why we use measurement instead. Okay, so example is the number of visitors, the number of students, the number of occupants. Yeah. Okay, so it's very important for you to remember that you should not use the number of when you are pertaining to Uncountable nouns or percentages. Okay? Because hindi siya pwedeng gamitin in that specific situation. So you can't say the number of money. Now, if you are going to use uncountable nouns, you could use the term the amount of or the quantity of. Okay? Ito naman yung ginagamit when you're pertaining to uncountable nouns. For example, the amount of money. Okay? That's the difference between number and amount. The number of is used with countable nouns, and the amount of is used with uncountable nouns. All right? Is it clear? You have to listen carefully because later you have a seat work that we will be checking as well. Okay, now let's talk about proportion. Yan, talagang nasanay sila sa 9:30. I'm just kidding. Hindi naman eh. Ay, 9:27 pa lang pala kasi. Okay. So, we're already halfway through, Joshua. Just kidding. Okay, so we have here proportion. So, the word proportion means, kung naalala nyo, when you were back in the high school algebra, we were talking about fractions. So proportion is something like that. It is used to describe percentages, not numbers, okay? The proportion of people. The proportion of pizza, okay? So half of the pizza will go to the girls and half of the pizza, half of the proportion of pizza will go to the boys. Okay, next we have the word figure. Okay. Again, you can also use it in a phrase, the figure 4. Same as the proportion of, dito naman, we will use it in the phrase, the figure 4. So it's preceded with the determiner, the, and then followed by the preposition for. Okay? The figure 4 visitors to the UK. So the figure 4 is used with uncountable nouns. Okay, nouns that you can count. Cannot count, okay? And then we can also use it when we're pertaining to countries. The figure for Canada. You can also use it when you are talking about percentages. The figure rose to 10%. The figure can be used in almost any situation. So if you need a generic term, you can use the figure 4. Because this is a very versatile phrase. Unlike the other ones that we talked about earlier, na magagamit nyo lang siya in particular forms of nouns. But this time, the figure 4 is quite versatile. All right? Okay, now let's use the word ratio. The word ratio is used when we're describing a relationship in quantity, amount, or size between two or more things. Okay? The ratio of men and women in the classroom. Okay? So as of now, the ratio is 50-50. Because there are 3 women, excluding me, kasi students lang pinag-usapan natin, okay? So 3 men and 3 women. So 50, the ratio is 50-50. Okay? The example given here is the ratio of students to teachers in the school is 9-1. Meaning, in 9 students, there's only 1 teacher. And now let's move on to the word data or data. Okay? In speaking, you can either use the pronunciation data or data. However, you have to be consistent. If you already mentioned one pronunciation, just use that all throughout. Okay, but of course, stop it. Don't interchange them or don't use both because then you will show inconsistencies with your pronunciation. But yes, how do we use the word data? Definitely, you will be using the word data a lot because you will be interpreting the data in writing task one. So it can be used as a singular or plural noun. For example, the data shows or show versus the graph shows data on students' tardiness. Okay, pwede mo raw siyang gamitin as plural and singular. So whether you say the data shows or the data show, it means it's acceptable. Okay? But if you're going to use it on a prepositional phrase, the graph shows data on students' tardiness. This time, the data on is used to pertain to tardiness, which is a singular noun. Okay? Right. Now I will be showing you a list of words, specifically verbs that you could use when you are introducing your writing task one in the introduction part. So we have here shows, enumerates, illustrates, presents, gives, provides, describes, delineates, expresses, outlines, compares, shows, contrasts, indicates, gives data on, gives information on, presents information about, shows data about, outlines, summarizes. Okay, bakit naka-cross out yung depicts and denotes and demonstrates? So, Sir Kevin crossed them out because he is not recommending these words. Okay? Kasi sa introduction, it is not recommended to use these three words. Now, tignan natin yung mga expressions dito sa baba. Shows contrast, gives data on, gives information on, presents information about, shows data about. What have you noticed with those expressions that I just mentioned? And why do you think we would recommend you to use them? And pertaining to shows contrast, gives data on, gives information on, presents information about, shows data about. Sorry, could you say it louder? Well, okay, yeah, it's an acceptable answer, but to be more specific, why are we recommending to use the phrases? Kasi it's additional number to the words that you need to yung kota ng words na kailangan mo. Okay, so if you use these phrases, definitely 2 words additional yan. Diba? 1, 2 words additional. So that's why we're recommending you to use phrases. Okay? Do you have any question on this part? Okay, let's move on to presents versus represents. This may be a little confusing, so I need you to listen carefully, okay? So it's very simple actually. You don't have to be confused. Why? Because when we use present, we use it in the beginning of the sentence. Okay? And then represent is used in the middle part ng paragraph. Because present means what is shown directly. Okay? This table, the table presents, the graph presents, and then sa mga following na sentences, saka mo palang gagamitin yung represent when you are pertaining to single women without children represented 54% of the total population. Okay? So sorry. Teka lang. Okay, so The word present pertains to the number of students in Grisham College, and represent is what it stands for. Okay, so it's followed by a percentage. Represented 54% of the total population. Always remember that the word present is used in the beginning of your paragraph, and the word represent cannot be used in the beginning. It should be used in the middle or on the latter part of your paragraph. Okay. So now the following list of time expressions that we have here. Ito, magagamit nyo rin to sa writing task 2. Okay? Why? Well, because you can use these time expressions when you're writing your essay already. Okay? Now, let's try to refresh your memory in the use of prepositions. Okay? So, yung in versus on. Okay? Definitely when you're using the preposition on, we're pertaining to a specific date. Okay? When is the IELTS British Council Fair? On Saturday, April 26, 2025. My specific day, my specific date. But now if we're only pertaining to the year or the month, we use in. Alright? Kasi walang specific na date pa. Okay, so in December in 2025, when did you take the board exam? I took the board exam in 2015. I took the board exam on September 16, 2015. Okay, see the difference? Okay, of course, when we're using when we're talking about the duration, we use from 2001 to 2010. Okay? So, next we have between 1965 and 1969. It means that a particular thing occurred, or a particular event happened between 1965 to 1969. So, somewhere in between those years. Okay? Next, we have over a period of, meaning 10 years or more. During the period, meaning within the time given. In the first half of the year, pag sinabi natin in the first half, ilang bang months meron sa isang year? 12. So, when we say in the first half, we're pertaining to January to June. Okay? Kasi first half yon. Eh, yung half kasi ng 12 is 6. So, yung 6 months. Next is for the first quarter. Pag sinabi natin quarter, 12 divided by 4, meaning 3. Right? So, January to March is the first half of the year. The second half of the year is April to June. Third quarter. July to August. Then July to September. July, August, September. And the last quarter pertains to? Yes, the 3 Burr months. 4 yung Burr months, pero yung October, November, December lang yung last quarter of the year. Okay? You can also use quarter when you're giving time expressions, right? 9, a quarter past 9. Ano ibig sabihin nun? 9:15. Kasi 15, 30, 45, an hour, right? Or a quarter to 9. Ano yung a quarter to 9? 8:45 yon. Okay. Next. In the mid, meaning kalagitnaan ng 1970. Okay. So don't worry because handouts will be provided kahit hindi nyo na ilista or kopyahin yung mga time expressions. But because we're gonna be having a short vocabulary exercise later, pwede nyo na rin namang picturean if you want. Okay, now we will be more specific with words. When we're talking about up verbs, we're pertaining to the synonyms of the word increase. Okay? Bakit hindi namin nire-recommend na gamitin yung word na increase, decrease in your essay, writing task 1? Simply because they are so generic words, right? Ilang beses nilang nabasa yung word na increase tsaka decrease. So, if you repeatedly use those terms, then definitely you will not be given credit for competency in vocabulary. Okay? So now we're going to talk about the different synonyms or words that are pertaining to up verbs. But you're not going to use these words in every situation. Na pataas. Okay? There's only a particular situation that you could use the word soar, rocket, and leap, and climb. Okay? So, i-discuss natin isa-isa. So, the word soar, S-O-A-R, make sure na tama yung spelling kasi may isa pang soar, S-O-R-E. Iba yun na. Yun yung sore throat. Yun yung pag masyado mo maraming ininom na milk tea. Nagkaka-sore throat. Okay? So, to increase to a high level in a short, very short time. So, pag may nakikita kayo sa graphs nyo na malaking increase tapos short period of time, that's when you can use the word soar. Okay? You can't simply use the word climb because climb is medyo subtle yung word na climb eh. Pag sinabi natin soar, biglaan. Biglaan na pagtaas. Okay? So, it is a more extreme term than rapid increase or steep increase. So, mas ma-extreme pa daw yung term na soar kesa sa rapid. Ibig sabihin kasi ng rapid, mabilis, right? So, mas extreme pa yung word na soar. Okay? Next, we have rocket. So, have you heard of the term inflation has skyrocketed in 2022? 2025 actually, ngayong taon. Nag-skyrocket ang inflation. Have you heard that term? So meaning everything is expensive. Alright? So, you can use the word rocket when we're pertaining to extreme changes. Increase in something. Hindi mo na kailangan gamitan ng any qualifiers or adverbs yung word na soar at saka rocket because they're already in the most extreme state. Okay? So, hindi mo pwedeng sabihin the graph shows that the statistics soared high. Huwag nang soar high kasi ibig sabihin agad ng soar is pataas at saka mabilis na pag-angat. Okay? Okay. You can also use the word leap because it shows a large and sudden rise. For example, the prices leapt to 90% in 1 year. So sa loob ng isang taon lang, it increased to 90%. Okay? Another one is climb. But the word climb is a little bit neutral. Okay? So hindi siya same sa paggamit ng soar, rocket, and leap because the word climb is relatively a neutral verb. For example, the population climbed to over 1 million by 1980. But in the sentence, it's not very particular as to when it started to climb. Pero sinabi niya lang na 1980 na-reach yung peak. Okay? 1 million population. All right. Now, We have one more word on the list before we move on to the next category. So we have the word surge. It also means sudden rise, and there's no need to use an adverb with the verb surge. So let's read the example. A surge in migration is seen in November. A surge in migration is seen in Canada. Sino dito yung papunta Canada? Ay, wala ba? Sino wala? Okay, but I think in the first quarter of 2025, I have encountered a lot of students who are actually bound to Canada. Ito si Irish. Hi, Irish. Okay, so yes, you can use surge when you're pertaining to a sudden rise in the data that you will interpret. Okay, do you have any questions with these verbs? Sa mga nasa Zoom, you can drop a chat if you feel like you have questions or anything that you would like to voice out. So now we're going to talk about noun verbs. So this one is a phrasal verb, slip back. Okay? So slip back is used for falls that come after rises. Okay? Hindi mo siya magagamit in every situation kasi ang sabi dito, yung slip back can only be used kapag may pataas and then biglang baba and then pabago-bago. Right? So it says here that slip back is only used when you're talking about a sudden rise and then biglang bumaba. Okay? Sudden rise and then biglang baba. Yung data na makikita mo. So, the use of electricity slipped back to 50 units in May. The electricity rate in Nueva Ecija slipped back to 75%. Di ba bumaba yung kuryente? Cellcore. Cellcore dito sa Cabanatuan eh. Dun sa amin, Nego. So, kamusta naman yung bills nyo ng kuryente ngayong summer? Okay. So, mataas yung bill. But the thing is, actually, I've heard that the solar power is gonna dominate the provinces soon. Am I right? That's why a lot of electrical companies are trying to lower down their rates. Ano ba? Kasi sa Nego, sobrang laki talaga. Like, 50% ata ng, hindi naman 50%, pero parang ganun na yung nabawas sa bill namin. Okay, so before we used to pay like around 4 or 5, but now we're paying only 1/8. Oh, yeah, that's right. Alin? I think it started around the last half or second half of the year last 2024, and then consistent naman siya. Yeah. Right. Gapan City. Yes. Okay, so next we have the term drop and dip. They are normally used for fairly small decreases. So, hindi siya magagamit sa mga decrease na malaki yung difference. Alright? It's only used when you're trying to describe small changes na pababa. Okay? So, it dropped or it dipped. A drop in the crime rate can be seen last year. Okay. Since we're talking about these neutral words, now we're going to talk about some extreme words. Plummet. It is the strongest word. Okay? So it means to fall very quickly and a long way. For example, the number of tourists to the city plummets after September. Meaning, hindi na kasi siguro peak season in September in that specific area. That's why the number of tourists plummeted. Okay? So, ibig sabihin na to, let's say from 500 tourists per day, it plummeted to oh, strongest and most extreme nga talaga. Okay, 5 tourists na lang per day. Okay, so in every country, they have a specific season kung kailan peak yung number of tourists or visitors, right? For example, in countries such as Japan, South Korea, and China, the peak season is during spring season because everybody wants to see the cherry blossoms. Take photos, right? Sino dito ba yung galing Japan? Ay, wala pala siya. Wala pala sila dito. But anyway, we have students from Japan. And then during autumn season, because the leaves of trees turn different colors in autumn season. That's why a lot of tourists would go to those countries, such as Japan, China, Hong Kong, and South Korea. Kasi yun yung wala sa atin eh. Right? Wala tayong spring, wala tayong... But the thing is, it's so alarming these days because of climate change. It has been reported that spring is very short. And then autumn is also very short in those countries with 4 seasons. So malapit na rin silang maging 2 seasons like Philippines. Tropical and rainy season lang. Diba? It's, hindi ko nga akalain na may experience ko to in my lifetime. Because when I was a bit younger, I thought that climate change would not be that drastic. But obviously, it is. Paglabas mo, sobrang init, diba? And even schools get suspended because of hindi. Kayo po, di ba teacher po kayo? Nasa-suspend po yung mga classes pag sobrang init. Tama po ba? Or sa Gapan City? Because in our... Ah. Plus the number of students in one classroom. So how many are they in one classroom? Yeah, actually back in 2014, 60 something pa nga eh. Mayap-yap. Ay, dito sa Klan. Mayap-yap? Ay, baka kilala mo sila, ano, yung mga naging kabatch ko before. Di ba po nagtuturo pa rin po kayo hanggang ngayon? Hmm. Baka kilala niyo po si Ma'am Fatima Hoson. Baka elementary sila pala. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Oh, di ba nag-expose pa ako ng names dito? Huwag niyo isa-search sa Facebook. Okay, next. Plunge is the only use when there is an extreme fall. Okay, so yung plummet, yun yung pinaka-strongest word. And next to it is the word plunge. Okay, so this is pertaining to an extreme fall. Example sentence is the number of students plunged from 1,040 to 150. Medyo mas OA pa rin yung from 500 tourists, naging 5 na lang talaga. Medyo mas OA pa rin doon. Okay, in this case, you can use the word plunge. Alright? So I think you've heard the word plunge in some commercials. Yeah, parang take the plunge. So it's like, take the risk, something like that. Another expression. Okay. We're done talking about up verbs and down verbs. Now we're gonna move on to future forms. So these are the words that you could use when you're pertaining to future forms. So the figure will probably or likely reach 15,000 in 2020. The figure should reach 15,000 in 2020. The figure is likely to reach 15,000 in 2020. So we are going to use future forms when there is no specific data that shows this increase, but then yung trajectory ng statistical data na nasa kung ano bang illustration na nasa writing task 1 is showing you that yun yung magiging papunta. Doon papunta yung statistic. So, you should use these future terms when you are not sure. Parang nagbibigay ka ng sarili mong interpretation as to how the rate will go. Okay, so you should use will probably, will likely, should, or is likely to. Okay? Because when it comes to those illustrations, hindi lang naman description ang gagawin natin, kundi interpretation din. Okay? Okay. You can also use the terms predicted, expected. The figure is expected to reach. The figure or the number is likely to reach or anticipated. It is anticipated to reach. Okay. The word forecasted, you can also use it, and estimated. Okay, so these words, you can use them when you are pertaining to future forms. Okay, now let's move on to nouns and prepositions. Okay, so these are phrases that you could use when you are pertaining to them. So the comparison of or the comparison between, the differences between, the changes in, the number of, information on, data on, the proportion of, the amount of, information on, data about, the trend of, the percentages of. So you have to memorize these phrases. There's no other way para hindi kayo magkamali sa paggamit ng prepositions. Okay? Because I know that it will be very confusing pag nandun na kayo sa actual writing task. But then if you memorize these phrases, then hindi na kayo magkakaroon ng vocabulary and grammar liabilities. Okay? Slide 17 out of 50 pa lang pala tayo. Okay. Let's read some examples. So this is a list of phrases, nouns, and prepositions. Now we're going to move on to verbs plus prepositions. Okay, this year unemployment has increased by, so the verb that we use is increased, and the preposition is by 20,000 cases. So it means that the difference between this year and last year is 20,000 cases. Yun yung ibig sabihin when you use the expression increased by. Okay? This year, unemployment has increased by 20,000 cases. Meaning, 2020, anong date na ngayon? April, right? April 2024 to April 2025, 20,000 people have become unemployed. At isa na kayo doon. Kasi you're currently studying.
Yes.
For you to, I mean, si ma'am pala naka-maternity leave lang. But most of you, naging unemployed muna kayo to give way to your IELTS review, right? Okay, next example, notice the prepositions. Okay, this is just a short explanation. We use increase by with the verb and an increase of with the noun. Okay? This year, there has been an increase in unemployment of 5%. So, naka-attach yung increased, yung preposition na by sa verb na increase. And then yung increase of, pwede siyang in between. Okay? Increase in unemployment of 5%. So it is followed by the noun. An increase in unemployment of 5%. Okay? So ganyan yung mga forms na kailangan yung try to memorize these. Okay? Next, the preposition to. This year, unemployment has risen to 10%. It means that the end result is that unemployment is up to 10%. Another example is this year there has been a rise in unemployment to 10%. Okay. So as you can see, pinaraphrase lang naman yan, but it actually has the same meaning, right? So, in the first sentence, the unemployment has risen to 10%. And then on the second sentence, there has been a rise in unemployment to 10%. So they just have the same meaning, pinaraphrase lang sila. Okay. We use to rise to when we're using the verb, and arise to when we're using it with the noun. Okay? A rise in unemployment to 10%. Okay, so more phrasal expressions. Supplement use peaked at 25% in April. It reached a peak of 25% in April. Kung mapapansin nyo, peaked at is used as a verb. It peaked at. And then it reached a peak of. A peak of is a noun. Okay? Again, same meaning, same word, same interpretation, but paraphrase siya. Okay? So you have to be ready to make different kinds of patterns of sentences. The number of viewers fell to a low of only 1.1 million in August. So, in this preposition, you can use a low of when you're pertaining to the lowest number. Okay? There's another set of phrasal verbs that you should be memorizing. So this is it. This is the list of words. Okay, so it has been more than an hour since we started our lecture. We will quickly pause the recording and I will see you guys in 5